joining from South Africa and around the world. My name is Won-Young Kim, a director of the Research and Information Division of the Korea-Africa Foundation, and I have the pleasure of opening today's Korea-South Africa Future Dialogue, Education and Women's Empowerment session. On behalf of the Korea-Africa Foundation and the Embassy of the Republic of Korea in South Africa, I warmly welcome you all to this important gathering. This session builds on the momentum from last year's Korea-Africa Summit and the Korea-South Africa Future Dialogue held in Pretoria in South Africa. Our goal today is to identify shared challenges and promising pathway for collaboration between Korea and South Africa. In the area of the education and women's empowerment, it means areas that are essential to sustainable growth and inclusive development. So we are honored to be joined by distinguished guests, speakers and panels from academia, government, and the private sector in both countries. To begin, we will hear welcome remarks from His Excellency Ambassador Dong Han-yang, the Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to South Africa.
So thank you so much, Moderator, Director Kim, and good morning to our friends in Pretoria, and good afternoon to our colleagues in Seoul. Distinguished guests, my special thanks go to Professor Kim Soo-won and Dr. Gabaza Mabeleke, University of Cape Town, and Professor Bakayong, and the Miss Siamina Siabine, and Dr. Baek Seung-jin, and Miss Lev Patrice Market of CSL Manager of Samsung. It is a great privilege to welcome you all today. I am pleased to note that following the first Korea-South Africa Future Dialogue series held in May, today's session marks second part, focusing on two themes which are essential to building a more inclusive and sustainable future for our bilateral relations, education, and women's economic empowerment. As all of us are well aware, now digital technologies are reshaping the landscape of work and learning, and the world is undergoing a sweeping and rapid transformation. In this context, I'd like to emphasize that ensuring fair access to education and economic opportunity has never been more critical. Especially empowering women through education is not only a matter of equality and human rights, it is a strategic imperative for driving economic growth and sustainable development. When women are equipped with knowledge, skills, and opportunities, the positive impact extends beyond individuals and uplifts entire communities. However, we should not turn our eyes away from the fact that systemic barriers persist, limiting women's access to quality education, leadership roles, and full economic participation. Furthermore, both Korea and South Africa face common challenges in bridging digital divides, expanding access to STEM and technical education, and strengthening women's roles in the labor market. As our bilateral cooperative relations deepen, exchanging knowledge and building a mutually supportive partnership will be critical to shaping better futures for both present and future generations. In this regard, I am confident that this session will serve as a platform for dynamic dialogue and innovative thinking. Today, we are honored to be joined by experts from academia, international organizations, and the private sectors. Their diverse perspectives will help us reflect on the structural and policy barriers and highlight successful initiatives that are already making an impact, from digital skills training program to models of women-led innovation. In concluding, I hope today's dialogue will inspire new partnerships and strategic pathways, laying a strong foundation for more in-depth and result-driven discussions. at the hybrid Korea-South Africa Future Dialogue Conference scheduled for September this year. I look forward to an active engagement and productive discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador Yang, for your thoughtful and encouragement message. And your continued support and leadership strengthen the foundation of our bilateral cooperation, I believe. Thank you. Thank you so much. And next, we are delighted to invite Professor Suwon Kim to deliver the keynote address and to guide us through the main discussion today. Professor Kim, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Wonyoung. And thank you, my friends, and thank you, new friends. I am Professor Kim Suwon. Well, before I get started with my bit of talk, let me just introduce myself. I have been educated in South Africa, first allured by the beauty of the country. I had my study at University of Cape Town and University of the Western Cape. And there I was very impressed, and I have learned a lot and grown a lot from the engaging class and education system of South Africa, which is today's talk as well. Well, I still remember that I sang along Nkosi Sikeleli Africa on my graduation with my other colleagues. And of course, my favorite sport is now rugby. Well, that's a bit of myself. I think that link of myself as a bridging role between South Africa and Korea today got me this chance to link and introduce my colleagues here and to talk about South Africa and Korea and our shared challenges and potential room for collaboration. Well, this year we are going to talk about shared challenges and cooperation in education and women's empowerment. And as some of you might be aware of, today's talk is a continuation of last year's conference, which was about South Korea, South Africa Future Dialogue, Shared Growth, Sustainability, and Solidarity, which took place last year in November in South Africa. Last year's talk was mainly to celebrate the first Korea-Africa Summit, which was last year, June. And last year, we talked about the outcome of the Korea-Africa Summit and what we can expect from this year's G20, which is going to be hosted by South Africa. And also, we had two themes, which were Korea-Africa in healthcare cooperation and Korea-Africa in human resource development and women's empowerment. This is why we are having this special seminar today, to continue what we have started, and so we continue it and we can develop it further together. This year's talk is even more important and meaningful because South Africa is hosting G20 and African Union is going to be the full member of the G20. So and in that context, I'd like to talk about the future of collaboration between South Africa and Korea. Well, for that, we invited distinguished academic members and the practitioners in international organizations and even private sectors. I think my role today is to set up a stage, because now we're going to have a series of talks from serious professionals in this field. And for that, let me just briefly, this triangle is what is called the Future Triangle, made not by myself, but by the South African government. You can find this beautiful triangle in South Africa's National Artificial Intelligence Policy Framework. I took this framework because this triangle of past, present, and future can be a good guideline of South Africa and Korea collaboration. The triangle explains three important pillars that we have to think about for future collaboration. First is weight of the past. Our future and our present is bound by the weight of the past in our collaboration as well. In terms of the past, South Africa and Korea shares a lot of past burden or sadness in some sense. For instance, during the imperial time, Korea, the photo, the image on the top is the Japanese Imperial Army was taking Korea's copper product to produce bullets. And the one below is the famous Kimberley diamond mine. Our resources were taken by imperialists, and then later on, both South Korea and South Africa had suffered from political oppression. And we also had fighters, freedom fighters, and a lot of students. The photo here is Lee Han-yeol fighting, demonstrated and unfortunately passed during the student demonstration for democracy. And here, this photo, also very sad but famous image of Hector Peterson in 1976 in Soweto. The student was protesting against Afrikaans language education, sorry. Well, but the weight of past is shaping what we have today. But today, the present that we have is not just a burden, it also can work as a propeller that we can go forward. For instance, our past history of colonization or war for democracy now pushing the students of both countries to fight for more equal world, more decolonized world, as we saw in Rhodes Must Fall in South Africa, and a similar student movement also were witnessed in Korea. While domestically, we both are busy or occupied and happily engaged with undoing the past injustice, internationally, South Africa and Korea are also trying to play a pretty similar role as a bridge. Today, this year, as we talked about, South Africa is hosting G20, bridging Africa and the world. Korea is also aimed to play a similar bridging role between the global South and the North. As a country who suffered colonialism and a country who made a, well, rather exemplary economic and political achievements. Well, that common path leads us to the pool of the future together. Today, we are going to talk about education and gender, especially in terms of technology and STEM education. When it comes to technology and the youth, now we cannot talk about artificial intelligence, which make a overwhelming and everywhere impact on our lives. And there's one common challenge that Korea and South Africa face together that I like to highlight is today's AI principles and ethics are mainly guided by the West and the Western narrative. The Western narrative of technological development and technological transformation in a form of Western development are challenging Korea's and South Africa's own development of technology and our own philosophy and guideline. And there, I think we can find more room for South Africa and Korea collaboration. Well, this is a bit of, a promo of myself, but last week I won a government research grant to study how Korea's AI technology can decolonize South Africa's museum with the case of Khoi cultural heritage. Well, I think that sort of academic research and academic endeavor can be a good example of Korea and South Africa's future collaboration together. Now, before we get to learn a good talks and discussions from our esteemed panelists and discussants, let me just briefly connect what I just talked about, the future triangle, in a context of education and gender. Korea is, yes, made a very outstanding economic growth, and many scholars point out education and the role of human capital behind it. In fact, there is a study that an extra year of education can increase the yearly income of a labor by 9%. And there was institutional support from the Korean government to provide better education, which now led Korea to one of the IT-strong countries in the world. But not just the elite education, the education in Korea, when we now look back, played an important role as a social network when Korea's social network was not solid enough. And the education itself was also a very important tool of social mobility, which now led to the 75% of high school graduates in Korea is now signed up for a high school, like high education in Korea. So 3 out of 4 high school students are getting and receiving university education. On the other hand, when we look at South African data produced by the Education Ministry, 1 out of 4 South African high school graduates get to study in universities or tertiary education. Yet, it's interesting when we look at female representation in STEM education, in higher education, only 25% of students are female in Korea, while almost half, slightly less than half of STEM students in South Africa are female. The point I like to highlight is we, although share lots of historical and present and future similarities and shared challenges, we still have lots of different trajectories of development, which is going to provide even bigger room for South Africa and Korea collaboration. That is why we are having this wonderful seminar today. And for that, today we are going to talk about 2 themes. The theme, which are the first panel will talk about current status of women's education and economic participation in Korea and South Africa by 2 esteemed academics. And then that panel is going to be followed by a more in-depth discussion by practitioners with the theme of opportunities and perspectives of Korea and South Africa cooperation. Well,
Thank you.
and I am very glad to guide you to the whole process of today's talk. And Wonyoung, if I may, can
Yes,
I introduce Professor Gabaza Maluleke from University of Cape Town, and my good friend.
Thank you everyone for inviting me. It is a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited to see some familiar faces, some people I met last year. So it's great to be here, and thank you again to the Korea Africa Foundation for this invitation. I'm excited to share my insights. So the theme I've been asked to reflect on, education and women's empowerment, with a specific emphasis on women in STEM, is both urgent and complex. I must admit, at first, I hesitated. While my academic work is firmly grounded in feminist politics, it tends to focus more on gender-based violence, digital activism, and the politics of representation, rather than on education policy or STEM pathways. However, this invitation has offered a generative opportunity to think through education and empowerment using a conceptual framework I've been engaging with in recent years, Shintu in Sitsonga, corresponding to Isintu in isiZulu, and Situ in Sesotho. For the purposes of this talk, I'll use these terms somewhat interchangeably, though it is important to emphasize that they are not synonymous. Each term is rooted in the particular historical, linguistic, and cultural context from which it emerges. What they share is an orientation towards Bantu logics, that is, modes of knowing and being that are relational, situated, and continuously negotiated within specific and social ethical frameworks. As Takata reminds us, Isintu is not a static archive of traditional customs. Rather, it is a dynamic process of becoming, continually shaped by communities deciding what to preserve, what to let go of, and how to adapt to evolving circumstances. It is a living epistemology, not simply a cultural inheritance. At its ethical core lies the principle of Ubuntu or Butu, not merely as a moral ideal of kindness, but as a relational ethic, a way of organizing society around mutual responsibility and interdependence. As Takata further notes, Ubuntu cannot exist without Abantu, the people, and the logics of Isintu that sustains communal life. In this view, to be Umtu, a person, is not a biological given. It is a moral achievement earned through one's conduct within a community. Crucially, Shintu is also epistemological. It offers a way of knowing that is distinct from and often resistant to the universalizing, individualistic paradigms of Eurocentric modernity. It privileges relationality over atomization, fluidity over fixicity, and communal responsibility over personal accumulation. These are not simply values. They are ontological commitments with profound implications for how we might think or rethink education and empowerment, particularly in relation to African women. Let us briefly situate these reflections within South Africa's broader historical and institutional landscape. We often speak of contemporary South Africa as post-apartheid or democratic, suggesting a sharp rupture with the colonial past in 1994. Yet the foundational architecture of the South African state predates this moment. It was forged in 1910 as a political project by Europeans for Europeans, a settler colonial polity that excluded Black people entirely from citizenship. European women, too, were rendered legal dependents, but remained part of the broader imperial project. This origin story matters. It shapes the institutions we now take for granted. Schools, hospitals, courts, even the very form of the nation states. These are in many ways colonial institutions repurposed as modern. Inclusion within them is often portrayed as the apex of progress and exclusion as the ultimate injustice. But this framing itself is embedded in colonial assumptions about what counts as development, whose knowledge systems are legitimate, and what it means to live a dignified life. A persistent, if often unspoken belief underlies much of this, that African societies are or ought to be on a linear path towards European norms, the nuclear family, capitalist economies, liberal individualism, and technocratic governance. This assumption not only erases the violence of colonization, it also flattens the rich plurality of African epistemologies, treating them as obstacles to be overcome rather than knowledge systems to be engaged. We see these dynamics clearly in the discourse around education and economic empowerment. According to the 2022 census by Statistics South Africa, there has been considerable progress in basic education. Youth with no schooling have dropped from 5.5% to 1.6%, and access to primary education is nearly universal. State reforms such as no-fee schools, school nutrition programs, and NSFAS funding have extended educational opportunities, particularly to historically marginalized groups. Tertiary attainment has also improved, especially among Black African students. However, these educational gains have not translated into equivalent gains in labor market absorptions, particularly for women. Since 2014, female labor force participation has increased for nearly 5%, yet overall absorption rates remain below 40% and have declined across all education levels. Mainstream development frameworks tend to explain this discrepancy through structural barriers, gender divisions of labor, caregiving responsibilities, workplace discrimination, and what is often termed the motherhood penalty. While these are undoubtedly real factors, the analysis often stops there. It fails to consider how the economic advancement of some women by the underpaid or unpaid care of or migrant women who raise children, clean homes, and sustain entire households in invisible ways. In the South African context, this dynamic is particularly stark. Domestic labor, shaped by legacies of slavery, apartheid, and colonial servitude, continue to be feminized and racialized. Many such roles are now filled by migrant women from Zimbabwe, Malawi, and other neighboring countries. As such, even well-meaning empowerment initiatives aimed at South African women can unintentionally reproduce regional hierarchies and gendered subjugation, often along lines of national citizenship and class. This brings us to the matter of women in STEM. The problem here is not simply one of a leaky pipeline or unequal representation. It is more fundamentally an epistemological crisis. Women constitute just 23% of STEM professionals in South Africa, and only 17% occupy leadership roles. The dominant policy response has been one of representational inclusion, to insert women into existing structures in the hope that their presence will enhance diversity and spur innovation. Often, this is framed in market-oriented terms. Diverse teams perform better, design more inclusively, and reach broader consumer bases. While not without merit, this logic is deeply limited. It tends to treat women as a homogeneous category with shared interests, a view long critiqued by transnational and African feminists. It also ignores the fact that women who rise through patriarchal structures are often required to internalize and reproduce the very logics they might otherwise resist. More importantly, Inclusion itself can provoke backlash. In many male-dominated spaces, the presence of women is not perceived as progress, but as a threat to authority, to status, and to the norms of individualistic competition that underpin the systems. If the architecture of STEM remains rooted in extractive, hierarchical values, then mere inclusion is unlikely to produce transformation and risks making women complicit in their own marginalization. What then might a Shinto-informed approach offer? Let us begin by interrogating the category of women. In many global policy and development spaces, women is presumed to be a stable, biologically determined identity, often imagined within a Euro-American framework that centers the nuclear family, legal personhood, and liberal autonomy. As the elder Wome has argued, such constructions obscure the relational ways in which gender operates in many African contexts, where personhood is not defined in isolation, but through a web of familial relationships, responsibility, and care. In Xitsonga kinship systems, the designation mani, which is mother, is not contingent upon biological reproduction, but it is conferred through sustained acts of nurturing and care. A woman may be referred to as mankulu, which means elder mother, or mansongo, younger mother, in relation to her sister's children. Titles that denote generational and relational positioning within a wider network of care, rather than indicating direct biological lineage. This fluidity extends further. In relation to her brother's children, the same woman is referred to as hahani, a term often translated as father, but held by her. This is not a mere linguistic anomaly. It signals a deeper epistemological rupture. It unsettles normative assumptions that caregiving and authority are biologically determined, instead of locating them within practices of responsibility and relational presence. This terms gesture towards an expansive ecology of belonging in which mother and father function not as fixed identities, but as role activated by context. They are enacted through the presence of specific children, sustained through everyday acts of care, and relinquished when no longer needed. Within this framework, personhood is not defined by static categories, but by relational labor, by what one does for others, rather than by what one is presumed to be. The implications of this worldview are significant for how we interpret labor, care, and empowerment. Standard economic metrics such as labor force participation or income levels fails to capture the full scope of caregiving responsibility and community obligations shouldered by many African women. For example, the informal caregiving provided to the family, as conceptualized in Shinto, the emotional labor involved in sustaining family networks, and the financial contributions made under the rubric of Black tax are frequently invisible in formal data, despite being central to how many African women live and work. This is not simply a matter of data omission. It raises questions of epistemic erasure. How do we assess empowerment in contexts where employment and income are not sufficient indicators of social and economic contribution? What does it mean to empower a woman who already performs vital labor that falls outside formal recognition? And a Shinto-centered approach challenges the tendency to incorporate women into existing institutional and economic structures without questioning the foundational values of those structures. It calls for other frameworks of measurement and policy design, one that account for the collective, intergenerational, and moral economies that underpin African social life. Rather than focusing solely on inclusion within systems built on individualism and extraction, a Shinto perspective encourages us to rethink the systems themselves. This involves designing policies that take seriously the labor of care and community maintenance, and collecting data that reflects the full range of social contributions, such as time spent supporting extended family or community members. In sum, centering Shinto allows for a more nuanced understanding of gender and empowerment. It shifts the analytical focus from individual achievement to collective well-being, from rigid categories to lived relationalities. Only by doing so can we move towards a more just and contextually grounded vision of empowerment. To conclude, we must resist the temptation to treat education and empowerment as technical goals, check boxes on a global development agenda. Instead, we must approach them as epistemological questions. What counts as education, and according to whom? What kinds of knowledge are legitimized or erased? And what new futures become possible when we begin not with Eurocentric benchmarks, but from within our own epistemologies, our languages, our histories, and our ways of being? As we imagine new forms of collaboration between South Korea and South Africa, I invite us to not merely exchange best practices, but to interrogate the very vocabulary we use to define progress. Because when we begin from the knowledge systems that already exist within our communities, like Shinto, we do not merely reform existing structures, we open the possibility of building entirely different ones. Inkomu, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Maluleke, for your, as always, very intellectually stimulating, to the level of it could be somewhat challenging presentation. Well, but the core idea that Professor Maluleke wanted to highlight, I think it echoes with the theme of the seminar, including my previous bit of talk, the European assumption and the colonial assumption that still has lingering impact on South Africa and in some sense Korea, to the very varied spheres of our society, including education, gender empowerment, and labor market. We need to have a look at our perspective, which Professor Maluleke introduced with the term of Ubuntu and Shindu. And that specific space can become a good starting point of Korea and South Africa collaboration in education and gender empowerment. Thank you very much for that. And now we are going to continue our talk. And now we're going to listen more from Korean perspective from Professor Park Ga-young. She's a professor at the State University of New York. Thank you.
Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event to have a meaningful discussions on challenges in cooperation and in education and women's empowerment, both in Korea and South Africa. My name is Ga-young Park. I'm a professor at the State University of New York, Korea. My title today, the presentation is STEM and Women's Empowerment in Korea, Education, Policy, and the Power of Structured Collaborations. While Professor Maluleke, her talks more on focusing on the epistemology and the knowledge sharing and knowledge creation, my presentation in terms of the Korean perspective will be more focusing on the practices and the policies and some of the cases in terms of the collaborations and how we empower women in STEM. Now let's begin my talk. As digital and STEM competencies become essential across all sectors, equipping women with these skills is no longer optional. It's a very foundation for inclusive and sustainable growth. And in terms of the Korea, Korea has been recognized as one of the earliest countries in Asia to institutionalize national policies supporting women in science and technology starting from 1990s. And In South Korea, women have achieved high levels of education attainment, yet significant challenges and gaps remain in economic participation, and particularly in leadership. This presentation offers a very brief overview of how digital education or STEM education is shaping women's employment and how evolving support from government, industry, and civil society is helping to strengthen the pathway of Korea. And looking ahead, a key question is, then my questions most of the time is that then how part. How we can scale outcome-based multi-stakeholder collaboration that meaningfully connects education, employment, and leadership in STEM fields. Right. This chart shows the share of women enrolled in science and technology programs in Korea from 2012 to 2022 across all higher education level. And as you can see from this chart, the graph, master's and doctoral levels, the red line and the green line, as you can see from this chart, the graph, have shown the most significant increases. Women now represent nearly 37% of masters and 30% of doctoral students in science and technology. And bachelor enrollment has remained relatively stable, as you can see from this blue line, stable around 33%, indicating a plateau in undergrad gains. And associate level programs in 전문 학사 과정 in Korean, it shows the lowest and slowest growth, still under 26% as of 2022. While overall trends can be seen very positive, relatively, especially in grad programs, but relatively slow progress at the undergrad and associate level suggests that early pipeline challenges persist, which may contribute to impact on long-term leadership outcomes. And I'll provide you the snapshot of Korean women in education and work. In Korea, the share of female students entering science and engineering fields remain below the global average. It's 31.3%, and comparing to the global average of 35%. And among the 31.3%, the students who enrolled in engineering, it takes 25.6%, and who are getting into the natural sciences, comparatively much higher, 53.1%. And despite increasing participation of women in STEM, a concentration is less technical subfields, such as natural sciences, rather than engineering, as we can see, indicating enduring gendered pattern in specialization. Despite growth, you may think that maybe the female students, their performance in science math may be lower than the male students. No, actually, it's not true. Girls match or outperform boys in science, according to PISA 2023 data in Korea, suggesting that the issue is not ability, but conversion. And in terms of the ICT sector, as of 2023, they are most underrepresented. Females are most underrepresented in software as of 25.1%. And the labor force, in terms of the labor force participation gap, remains wide, 63% versus 74% of male, and only 19% of women hold middle or senior leadership positions. And I was surprised to hear that, according to Professor Malueka, 17% of the women held in South Africa takes the managerial positions in STEM field, but in Korea, 10% of the managerial positions in STEM fields as of 2020. And women make up approximately 10% in early stage entrepreneurship, and only 16.8% 8% in data industry. This is one of the significant data. Despite the tech's growing importance of this data industry, women held in 16.8% compared to 83.2% of male. And Korea has the largest gender wage gap in the OECD, which is approximately 31%. And unpaid care work disproportionately affects women, limiting availability for leadership tracks or upskilling. The bottom line, I introduced you many the numbers, but strong academic entry, but gendered specialization, and also the pipelines leaks early, and entry doesn't guarantee alleviation. Maybe that's one of the key, the bottom line of this snapshot of Korean women in education and work. And impact of STEM and digital education on women's economic advancement. I can say that, yes, it does have a high potential in a way that women-targeted digital programs could convert skills into jobs and higher pay. In case of the US and EU, in case of the US, STEM occupations are nearly double the national average. And so those, and in terms of the women in these roles here in this wage premium, and in terms of the EU, it reported that higher female participation in STEM is linked not only to higher income, but also to greater asset in terms of the job security. But I could not find the very direct causality in terms of the relations between causality of the STEM education and of the female and on their economic advancement. But these global cases suggest a plausible link as high-paying STEM and tech sector grows. Women's inclusion in these fields can have potential significantly enhance economic outcomes. I'd like to introduce you some of the interesting data. Women in ICT as of 2017, that's the latest, the data, publicly accessed data. That could be because of the how we categorize this ICT sector and in terms of the industry. We do have many other the data publicly available in other industry with different categories, but in terms of the ICT sector, that's comparing to male and female as of 2017 is the latest data that I could access. Women held approximately 28.1% ICT sector job, and compared to the men, 71.9% in favor of male employment. And at the same period, when we see the all industries data, then women held 41.1% total jobs and men approximately 59%, which means that women in ICT employment significantly lower than national average. And one of the interesting the bar graph is this, that this is the 2019 ICT workforce by major and gender. And as you can see, this despite increasing female entry into ICT, the left side of this blue indicates women. Only 18.7% of the women professionals measured in ICT compared to 80% of the male who are in the ICT workforce measured in ICT. It may suggest that many are working in supporting or peripheral roles, not in core tech development. It's really depending how we define core tech development per se. But that's not only the thing that I like to emphasize. One of the things that I like to emphasize is that it can also mean that, interestingly, as you can see, that a significant share of women in ICT did not major in ICT, as you can see from the middle of this bar graph, yet are entering the field through related disciplines or digital reskilling. And this can be considered as a promising sign for inclusive. And it also reflects the nature of the ICT industry, could be cross-disciplinary entry models. And the talking why we're talking about this, it's not only about the quantity per se. Now we're talking more about quality. And this shift highlights the Korea is no longer only addressing how many women enter ICT, but asking what roles they hold and how far they advance, which indicates a policy maturity phase. And if I may briefly introduce some of the Korea's women in STEM policy, we do have many supporting the policies, and this is mainly about the basic plan for fostering, supporting women in STEM, particularly for scientists and technicians, based on the Act on Fostering and Supporting Women Scientists and Technicians as of 2002. Korea's announced within like 5 years, every 5 years, starting from 2004, we announced this basic plan for fostering, supporting women in STEM. And as you can see that very first plan, starting from 2004, focusing more on the STEM camps, like the very particular designated short period of this camp and data building efforts, but there were no measurable targets. But as you can see, the second plan, more quantitative goals, like 1,000 women PhD per year. And the third plan, more focusing on utilization, emphasizing career continuity and aiming for a 60% employment rate. In the fourth plan, we're more talking about ecosystem, expanding ecosystem building. So from the entry to now, we're talking more about full support ecosystem. But STEM gender policies in Korea still emphasize numerical inputs over long-term career outcomes. So this may leave the leadership gaps at 10%. And as noted as argued by Cho, Korea's basic plan have evolved into a wider ecosystem, but still policy moves from numerical intake target to sustain a career and leadership outcomes. True gender equality in science and technology remain elusive. And the possible direction could be based on further utilization and also ecosystem building, but more on outcome integration. So not just entry participation. So this means that universities, industries, and governments need to contractually commit to measurable goals in hiring, retention, and leadership. And also previously, providing support structures such as flexible work or remote options and mentoring was more like optional benefits, but it should be more like baseline requirements. And we do have YZ, a government-affiliated public institution in South Korea, and provides many great initiatives and provides interesting programs for supporting the women. And one of the case that I like to introduce is one of the project that I also involved in here in Incheon City with General Motors Korea and Incheon Metropolitan City Office of Education and Incheon Technopark. And it's a collaborative AI education program co-funded by multiple institutions that I mentioned earlier. As you can see that many students are involved in Incheon area, and the State University of New York, Korea played executor roles and inviting other universities at Incheon Global Campus. I'd like to highlight this. The program is that each school team, high school team, member of 5 or 6 students, the ratio between the female-male students were 5, or sometimes if the males, it's a boys' high school, we don't have female students, but if it is general high school, we try to make it as like the balanced ratio between the inside of the team, and was matched with a university student mentor, including many women majoring in STEM from the State University of New York, but also this Incheon Global Campus, Ghent University, or George Mason University as well. And we invited many women majoring in STEM mentors, university mentors. And so they team up with this mentors and mentee team up as a one team, and they developed AI-based prototype project to solve local problems in Incheon and received many expert feedback over multiple rounds and had opportunities to pitch their idea, including directly to General Motors Korea and also in front of other experts and the universities and also Incheon Technopark. For the high school students, they exposed to real world STEM experience beyond textbook. And also one of the important things is that visible female role models, including university female students who major in STEM education, and also the experts and the mentors from General Motors, female engineers and male engineers as well. And manage for university mentors, they have the chance to lead the projects. Both female, male university students manage timeline and engage in public speaking. And for the institutions and companies, they could have opportunities not only to just participate in and more like a meaningful outreach. One of the key successful factors for this is we spent lots of time to structure this program so that each institutions have different interest in how can we make that interest fit into, but at the same time, we bolster the female male students and both high school and university students, empowering, but at the same time, how each institution's interest can be well embedded in that the program, and later on it can be lead to an actual outcome. So Incheon Metropolitan City of Education, they emphasize inclusive student selection, ensuring gender diversity, and Incheon Technopark, they focus on quantitative results such as a number and quality student prototypes. So we came up with 10 AI-based the prototype services or applications. And General Motors Korea sought meaningful outreach, not a symbolic CSR, but active employee involvement. So they try to genuinely contribute to strong student growth through mentoring and feedback and final stage pitching. So the program ensures the students receive multiple phase feedback, not just a one-time event. So at the very beginning to the end, all the participant institutions provide meaningful feedback and then come up with the actual prototype. And it highlights the importance of the collaboration needs architecture, not just participation in terms of the STEM education, STEM empowerment. And to conclude, I'd like to highlight that Women in STEM is not only about representation, but about innovation and inclusive growth. And what's needed now is a shift from fragmented efforts to an outcome-based collaboration model where government, industries, and academia co-design goals and shared opportunity for result in hiring, retention, and leadership. And the real collaboration means aligning incentives, embedding structural support, and treating inclusion as a driver of innovation, not an afterthought. And this ends my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Park. Well, it was a bit sad that Korea is a country with highest and largest gender wage gap in OECD. Personally, very sad information. Well, our first talk by Professor Maluleke opened a door for South Africa and Korea's collaboration in a light of epistemological and philosophical way. And our second talk by Professor Park Ga-young, she approached more data-based, and she also opened us another door and we can think of our collaboration more empirical and practical way. For me, it was also interesting, and I want to learn more about a fostering and supporting women in STEM policy, whether we can find some similar policy in South Africa. And in South Africa, the regional divide is still very severe in terms of STEM education and women empowerment. How can we share our thoughts and experience in the context of South Africa with a greater regional division? that sort of things we can keep in our mind for our next talk together. Well, thank you to professors. Based on these academic discussions, now let's move on to more practical talk. Now we are going to have our session 3 with the theme of opportunities and perspectives for Korea and South Africa cooperation. And for our first practitioner and esteemed speaker, I would like to invite Sia Mina Leshabane from United Nations Women. Thank you.
Good morning.
Floor is yours. Morning.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Sure.
I think the two speakers kind of summarized it so well for us as UN Women. The notes I was taking here, and I think they keep coming back many times, is collaboration, with the aim of making sure that when we collaborate, we will be able to get impact and results. Because if we do things in our own set of small corners, we won't be able to reach the results. As UN Women within the STEM field, we have partnered with the Department of Science and Technology here in South Africa and the Department of Women. The reason that we doing what we're doing in terms of the African Girls Can Code initiative is exactly that. We have seen that there is such a huge gap within young girls in high school taking up STEM subject that will enable them to be able to continue with the STEM subject in university or and after in their work life. So what we did, we then said, let us practically come in, because the Department of Education in South Africa, they have actually launched the coding and robotics within high schools and primary. But if already you are in a higher grade, you would not be able to access that because they had started it at a lower grade. So to bridge that, as UN Women together with UNICEF, we have come in and said, okay, let's take the girls between the ages of 17. Let us skill them within coding and robotics. Let's see that when they have this skill, will they be able to take on and be able to utilize the skills we've given them in the workforce, in their other life, whether they become entrepreneurs, because we have to look at it in the diverse as it is, so that we only are not looking at young women within employment, but within the women economic empowerment. How do we make sure that if they decide to be entrepreneurs, they will be able to do that? We have seen the data, the numbers are very low. 13% of women within South Africa are actually working within the STEM field. It is not okay. As UN Women, we're looking forward to collaborating with all the partners here so that we can then see as to whether how do we make sure that these young women that have not seen a computer, that have not heard a lot about robotics and coding and STEM field, how do we capacitate? Our quintile that we work with is within South Africa, it's quintile 1 to 3. So it's those schools that are no paying fee. They are in the rural of the ruralist. They have the data is expensive in South Africa. So meaning those girls, for them to be able to just sit and access information, it is it's a struggle. So we come in, we then say, how do we empower them from where they are and bring them closer to information, so that when we start counting the number of women that are taking up STEM subjects, we're counting even those who necessarily these services would have not gotten to them. And in South Africa, the other disadvantage is that even if you have 200,000 of young girls passing matric into universities, our university spaces would then say we have 400 to 300 spaces. So you have those bigger gaps that then we have the out of schools that we have never taken care of or thought about them. UN Women, we come in, we say, while you are thinking about whether you want to go work or you want to go to school, how about we come together and we teach you the digital skills in terms of coding and robotics? we were very honored when the Korea Foundation invited us to come through, because we do want to collaborate, because there are so many similarities within the South African context and the Korean context. But what I have seen when I was in Korea, and I think it's happening in South Africa, I've never seen people walking and typing and talking on their devices the way it happened. I came back, I'm like, oh my God, there's something that people are actually, I don't know whether they're talking to their devices or their devices are kind of the maps and stuff. But it is interesting to see that if we then make sure that the girls within the South African context, when they're holding their devices, they not only are on TikTok or any other thing, but they also are utilizing their devices to improve their skills, but are able to also code and do robotics. So this African Girls Can Code initiative within UN Women has been rolled out in 11 countries in Africa, so that we can see as to whether are we able to communicate within the robotics language, because all of us, we don't speak English, or every other country, they have their own language. But if we come in and speak the digital language, will we be able to bridge the gap? We will be able to also see the world as a bigger world rather than the countries that we come from. So we have been proud of this African Girls Can Code initiative. We have trained 125 girls to date. We are very proud that some of them actually took a gap year to make sure that they upgrade their subject, because now they have decided that this is what they want to do. So programs like this help shape the minds of the girls as well, as to even them thinking as to whether, if I have not been given an opportunity to just sit in this 10 days camp and somebody teaches me about coding and robotics, I would not be able to, to be able to know that there is a STEM within a subject, there is art can be used as well to be able to learn how to do coding and robotics. So we have been very privileged to collaborate with the government of South Africa and other NGOs and some of the donor organizations to come in and be able to try and bridge the gap, just to make sure that we increase the number of girls within STEMs in the South African schooling. And yes, we only are taking girls. So at this point, even though we say leave no one behind, girls are actually our priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leshabane. As a practitioner, she pointed out an important aspect we couldn't think of, which was not just employable, but female and girl students in STEM field in relation to entrepreneurship. And I thank you for your great work, and thank you also for pointing out another important point, which is digital divide. Which South Africa is doing very well in terms of digitalization and internet, but across Africa, only just 30% of African people have still access to the internet. That is also something that we need to think about together, right? Well, and then we are now going to move on to our second panelist, Dr. Baek Seung-jin. He's working at United Nations Population Fund East, particularly specialized in East and Southern African regions. Can I invite you, Dr. Baek Seung-jin? Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you to His Excellency Ambassador and also Embassy and the Korea Africa Foundation for organizing this very meaningful dialogue. Also grateful to learn from our previous speakers on various but interconnected viewpoints and insight, I believe. And again, my name is Seung-jin Baek, and the head of Middle Income Country Hub at the UN Population Fund station in Joburg. And our work focuses on advancing sexual and reproductive health and rights and empowering women and youth in the middle-income country setting in the Eastern and Southern Africa region. So we are about to launch a flagship publication highlighting how many African middle-income countries, including South Africa, remain stuck in so-called middle-income trap. In fact, in South Africa has been in the middle-income category for over 60 years already. So as we all know, South Africa is often cited as one of the most unequal societies in the world with significant gender-based disparities. So the using foresight approach, which was emphasized during the keynote remarks, we argue actually that the main cause of middle-income trap is about human capital in terms of persistent in maternal and adolescent-related disparities and girls' education and women's participation in labor market, which I think also has been discussed in detail so far. So I'm particularly interested in listening about the reframing of woman empowerment through the lens of Africa philosophical concept by Professor Maluleke. Her view really resonated with not just me, but also with argument made by Professor Semoglu, recent Nobel Prize in Economics, with his book Why Nation Fails, about post-colonial extractive institution setting. Based on my listening today in terms of building on these intersectionalities, I took a note many things. Let me share a few reflections, particularly from the perspective of education, labor market inclusion, as well as GBV, gender-based violence. First of all, regarding with education and its linkages to labor market, our analytical evidence shows that even after completing high school, many South Africa students perform at the academic level of lower secondary student in high-income country on average. So quality matters most, including the digital device as well. Also girls, based on our research, and the girls tends to outperform boys in terms of learning outcomes, which includes STEM education as well. But this human capital has not been utilized because only less than 50% of women participate in the labor force compared to around 65% of men in South Africa, with a very high concentration in informal sector as well as a gender pay gap. I think is a widened compared to South Korea. So simply investment to adolescent girls and women has been made relatively well compared to other neighboring countries, but this accumulated human capital has not been translated into socio-economic transformation in South Africa. So one of the effective ways to bridge these interconnectedness is about strengthening technical and vocational training, education and training, TVET system, which equip the young women, adolescent girls with the practical skills and open pathways to formal improvement. So I believe Korea's experience in expanding and modernizing its woman-centric TVET ecosystem with the skill matching market needs, etc., could be particularly relevant, maybe through the Korean knowledge sharing program initiative and other. And another issue is about gender-based violence. Our office, we've been collaborating with the private sector here in South Africa with the GBV fund to develop GBV maturity model, which can be practically institutionalized and utilized into business practices. And also we are also currently supporting South Africa presidency in developing national GBV strategy. And here, one key challenge is about absence of integrated data system. In other words, establishing GBV IMS, GBV Information Management System, I believe can enhance the effectiveness of its implementation, which we are currently discussing. So, but as you aware, this type of integration process require close coordination across the provincial government and law enforcement agencies, etc. And finally, within this domain, what I'd like to particularly emphasize is about teenage pregnancy. In fact, child marriage is relatively rare in South Africa compared to neighboring country, but unintended pregnancy among adolescents remain relatively widespread. So our team's GIS hotspot mapping using HMIS data that has been conducted recently has revealed stark discrepancies between national level data and local realities. So this underscore kind of need for targeted and localized intervention, especially comprehensive sexuality education and reproductive health fertility at the district level. And in short, investing in woman human capital and unlocking their full productive potential is not only a matter of right, but it is smart economics. While South Africa will face gradual population aging over the next 25 years, its growing working age population, in other words, youthful population, present a critical opportunity to harness the demographic division, but require strategic and timely investment. So with Korea's wealth of development experience, especially escaping middle income trap, and also extremely high level of the development potential that South Africa holds, I believe there is a enormous potential for mutually beneficial cooperation in this area. Let me stop here. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Baek-Seung-Jin. Dr. Baek-Seung-Jin, based on his experience in the field as well, expanded our view to a more broader concept of female human capital by adding a gender-based violence and female pregnancy, female student pregnancy issue, which all makes an impact on our topic of our discussion today, gender education and woman empowerment. Well, I just brought us a lot of things to think about, and I hope our last discussant, presenter, panelist, Lefat Treasure Makato, can hopefully give an answer to all those questions and issues that we have talked about today. Good luck, Ms. Makato, and now floor is yours.
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Kim. Mine is a very simple task today, is to share a story of collaboration in education between South Korea and South Africa. I've heard a lot about future collaboration, but with us is a little bit different because we have already had the pleasure of experiencing collaboration between these two countries. I'll just like to share my screen, if I may. Okay. I'm not sure what happened there. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, very well.
Thank you. So we have partnered with South Korea in terms of Samsung Innovation Campus. This initiative is part of Samsung's global corporate social responsibility efforts, and its main goal is to equip young people with coding and programming and artificial skills, helping them to succeed in the modern job market. In South Africa, it's been implemented with the Walter Sisulu University and the Central University of Technology. And to date, over 300 youth have benefited from this initiative. What you're looking at there is a picture of the Central University of Technology graduation. It was attended by His Excellency, Mr. Donghan Yang. Our core values as Samsung is people and co-prosperity, and that is the foundation of our corporate social responsibility strategy. With people, we are empowering the communities that we operate in through education, human rights, and personal development. And with co-prosperity, we collaborate with partners and communities for mutual growth and sustainable impact. These values align with Samsung's belief that long-term success is built on trust, respect, and shared benefit amongst all its stakeholders. You may ask, how did we partner with South Korea in the Samsung Innovation Campus? And our model is quite simple. There is a curriculum that was developed by Korean expertise or professors, and they have shared the curriculum with us in South Africa, which is also part of knowledge transfer. They've also shared an execution framework in terms of how do we operate the Samsung Innovation Campus and what kind of youth should we target that should actually benefit from this initiative. And from a local perspective, as Samsung, we look for partnership. As mentioned, we have partnered with the Walter Sisulu University and the Central University of Technology. What that means is that we also fund this particular initiative, and we also oversee the operations of that particular initiative. In terms of the partner university's responsibility is the execution, the project management, and we had the pleasure of having some of the universities accrediting this particular curriculum in their short learning courses. And also they have partnered with industry businesses to offer internship to some of our beneficiaries that also went through this curriculum. So we offer our strategy and content. Obviously, it's aligned with the national and higher education goals. And the Samsung Innovation Campus addresses skills shortage in areas like coding and programming and artificial intelligence. These skills, we all know, that are critical for employability in the fourth industrial revolution. So the program blends theoretical learning with practical components, which is otherwise known as capstone, to bridge academic and industry readiness. So far, we have been able to offer the curriculum in AI and coding and programming as the basic skills. However, through the partnership with South Korea, we have also received the curriculum that also covers big data and the Internet of Things. Although we haven't really implemented it as yet in South Africa, because the partners that we have engaged with, they have looked through the curriculum and they have requested more engagement with Korean expertise in terms of the delivery of that particular curriculum. We don't only provide AI and coding and programming, we also offer soft skills and job preparation skills, which are also fundamental. Impact in Southern Africa. We had the pleasure of expanding this particular curriculum to other African countries such as Lesotho, and Malawi, they have adapted this curriculum. And obviously with this curriculum, our main focus is skills development to enhance the employability prospect of our youth in South Africa. We mainly focus on youth that would otherwise be classified as previously disadvantaged, which also ties back to our mandate to triple BEE. So the target youth doesn't necessarily have to have previous skills in coding and programming. If they have higher educational needs, or they have the aspiration to be in technology-related vocational field, they are more than welcome to join this particular initiative. The main reason why we're having this discussion today is the inclusivity of women in STEM-related fields. And Samsung Innovation Campus is no different to the challenges that we face as a country. We still do experience low participation rate of women in SIC and obviously in the STEM industry as a whole. However, we see Samsung Innovation Campus as a catalyst to encourage women participation, because it is important for us to have gender equity in tech to boost innovation and economic growth. In terms of national context, we know that we have about 13% representation of women in STEM-related field. However, in terms of the Samsung Innovation Campus, we have 31% women representation, which is still fairly low and shows that there's still more work that needs to be done in order to ensure that a girl child is included in the STEM field. However, when we look at our year-on-year female participation growth, it shows that we are taking a step in the right direction, with only 8 females participating in 2022 to now having about 40 females participating in the year of 2025. And for the year 2025, this number is only a highlight of the beneficiaries that we've had in the first half of the year. We'll still have another intake in the second half of the year, where obviously we'll see this number grow. In terms of the best case collaboration, this collaboration stands as a model for how global partnership should work, leveraging each other's strengths while building local capacity. South African youth benefited from Korean expertise, while Korean learns about local context. This model is scalable and sustainable, empowering graduates to mentor others and expand the program's reach. We obviously have key performance indicators to see whether this collaboration and model is working or is headed into the right direction. So we do have satisfaction surveys that we take with our beneficiaries. We look at the application rate in terms of, do we have to grow this initiative? Also the attendance rate, obviously it will show if the beneficiaries are finding impact in this initiative, and also the completion rate. And we found that with the technical competency improvement is about 80%. Obviously here we're comparing when they started with this initiative and after they've gone through the curriculum. And we've seen an employment rate of about 36.4%. Of which I need to also still highlight that the 36.4% rate largely is male. So we still have more work to be done there, where we ensure that even the female students that go through this initiative are absorbed in the tech industry. In terms of education satisfaction from our beneficiaries, they have highlighted that the curriculum met their expectation, and 95% out of 100 said that they do see value in this collaboration and in this curriculum. acceptance rate, unfortunately, because there is obviously funding that is involved in this, we cannot take everyone that actually applies for Samsung Innovation Campus, although which is something that we're still looking into to ensure that everyone who has the interest to be part of Samsung Innovation Campus is given that particular opportunity. However, at this point, our acceptance rate is at 2:1. And a completion rate is about 94.3%. Our key focus with this collaboration is obviously expansion. In 2025, we are more focused on reaching more youth and universities across Africa. We are currently in negotiation to expand to Kenya and 2 more universities in South Africa. And we looking into increasing outreach to young women through target recruitment and mentorship so that we have a higher women representation in the Samsung Innovation Campus. We would like to create opportunities for alumni to get employment opportunities and entrepreneurship guidance and support. We are working with the Center for Entrepreneurship and Rapid Incubator to ensure that our beneficiaries that are not interested in taking the employment route, but rather want to be entrepreneurs, they are being guided and funded. We've seen great success stories where some of our beneficiaries, particularly in the Eastern Cape, have opened their small businesses and they are receiving funding and guidance as a result of this collaboration. We are looking to introduce advanced curriculum. Obviously, now that we have received curriculum in IoT and big data, we are looking into ensuring that we also offer those curriculum in South Africa, Malawi, Lesotho, and Kenya, and ensuring that the course is accredited across all countries that are actually partaking in this initiative. So that is a success model, and that shows how collaboration and partnership and working together for a greater cause is impacting the African youth. And we're looking into expanding, and discussing more on areas and synergies of collaboration and ensuring that we impact more African youth with this initiative. Thank you.
Ms. Makato. Well, today we talked about education and gender in a special light of STEM fields and digital and AI that Ms. Makato just introduced is predominantly driven by the private sectors. So it was great that we learned about a case of a private sector. Well, and then we are slightly behind schedule. If any participants now at the end of our talks needs to have 1 extra minute as an afterthought, then I'll allow you. But if you don't, I'll just pass this floor and online microphone to Ambassador Yang Jonghan for the last time for wrapping up. Ambassador, please.
Thank you, Professor Kim. My special thanks go to you. And many thanks for the participant for your active participation. I am confident that today's discussion will serve as a platform for our Korea-South Africa Future Dialogue Conference to be held in September. I look forward to working closely with you up to that moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Well, as Ambassador Yang just explained, I also strongly believe, and now I am confident that what we had today, the thoughts and ideas we shared together today is going to be a fantastic stepping stone for our next talk in person in South Africa. Well, thank you all for taking time to prepare a talk and to give a talk here today. And for this, thank you. I think I can wrap up today's session.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Sohn Kim, and all our speakers and panelists and the audience for your active participation. We have an excellent question from the audience regarding the barriers to Korea and South Africa cooperation in education and women's empowerment. But I believe that Dr. Beck's presentation has already addressed many of these challenges and offered some promising path forward. So with that, let me move on the conclude of today's sessions. So I'd like to take a moment to share that our next Korea-South Africa Future Dialogue session will take place in September this year as a hybrid event in South Africa, as Ambassador Yang and Professor Sohn Kim mentioned. We sincerely hope to see you there and conclude this valuable exchange. Additionally, please note that all events and major updates from the Korea Africa Foundation will be shared on our official website and Facebook page. So I warmly invite you to follow us and stay connected. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to and like our YouTube page for more updates and event coverage. So thank you once again, and goodbye from Seoul and from South Africa. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.